Yes, you can own and operate an Airbnb business without owning any real estate whatsoever. This business model is known as Airbnb arbitrage or rental arbitrage. Everybody knows that this is done through what's called subletting or sublease, and it's not illegal and just need the landlord's permission. But no one's telling you how to do this, are they? That's how the internet works, right? I'm not telling you anything unless you buy my course, unless you buy my ebook, unless you spend money with me so I can tell you how to do something. Well, in this video, I'm just going to tell you how you can do this so you can start your Airbnb business without owning any properties. And I'm going to teach you how to get past all the BS so you can get started in an Airbnb business as soon as possible. So, there's a lot to this whole Airbnb arbitrage thing, but we're going to make this pretty short and I'm trying to be as concise as possible. How's it going, guys? My name is Stephen Billman. You can find me on all social medias at Stephen Bill Moss, and I currently have 17 arbitrage properties. I've been doing this for about 3 years total without ever owning a single one of them, and I've done about $1 million this year in revenue. I've taught hundreds of people on how to do the same, and I also work with investors where I'll even find a property for you, furnish it for you, list it for you, and I'll even manage that same property for you. So it's been a heck of a ride. It's been fun. Have tons of trials and tribulations, and you can imagine I've had tons of failures and tons of wins, but you're here because you want to learn how you can do this too. So let's get right into it. What's up, YouTube world? So this is obviously my area of expertise, and in case you didn't already know, you can have a property that you don't own and you can sign a lease for it. Then the landlord can and will give you permission if you present yourself the right way. You can either write that into the lease, giving you permission, just add that to the landlord's lease, just write it in there. Or you can use what is called a lease addendum. This lease addendum is definitely something that we're going to talk about and something that we need to get into. So I'd appreciate it if you could definitely drop a like and subscribe. That's really all I'm asking, since I'm going to be giving tons and tons of free game away and stuff that's typically in people's private masterclasses. So what's in the lease addendum? The lease addendum could be really interesting to you. There's some basic stuff in there that's just mandatory, and then there's some larger things you can add in depending on what you think you can get away with that landlord. So the lease addendum outlines a relationship modification, and overall it's just an addition to the landlord's lease. But with a relationship modification that could go in the lease, but we use the lease addendum because sometimes landlords are too scared to change the lease in its entirety, and the lease addendum is easier for them to read, like one page and pretty much go, okay, cool, I'm gonna sign this. But it modifies the whole lease in a way that the lease addendum has a page of terms that explains that if this lease, the landlord's lease, contradicts the lease addendum, essentially the lease addendum overrides the landlord's lease. So pretty much it will just reference the address, usually called premise or property, and then it will say this one-page document or two-page document is purpose to outline the terms and agreement between the landlord and the tenant being your LLC. So, while the lease is active at premise, and then y'all would add stuff in the lease addendum, and we're going to talk about what goes in there and how those things get in there. Now, there's things that you need to put in the lease addendum, and then there's things you're going to want to put in the lease addendum. Now, I already have a lease addendum that I and my attorney have written, and it's stood the test of time, and I've used it, tons of my students have used it, and everybody in my B&B Syndicate program have used it. But to be honest, you can really just use this video in combination with some generic Google lease addendum. If you wanted to go the free route, you definitely can do it that way. However, I am going to warn you, there's going to be some stuff that's probably missing, and I wouldn't trust the Google lease addendum too much. But so the next thing, landlords understand that the nature of the tenant's business is to provide this location or premise as an accommodation for varying length of stays, including STRs or short-term rentals, as applicable by local regulations. Landlords shall allow the tenant to conduct all matters of business required in order to profitably run their short-term rental business. Landlords understand that what you do, and they also understand what your business is, and they're going to give you permission to conduct your business activities. Now, there's going to be stuff that you're going to want to put in there, and there's going to be some stuff that the landlord's going to want to put in there. This is where negotiations become super, super important. And this is normally another video that's in B&B Syndicate, which is the art of negotiation. But I also plan on dropping that video on here very soon. So make sure to drop the like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss that video and that totally free information that I definitely wouldn't want to miss out on. And if you've never done sales before, or you've never negotiated before coming to the table with a landlord, and you're trying to get permission to Airbnb their property, you're definitely going to want to know and learn how to negotiate, because you want to pitch this as a benefit to them. Because if you can get them to really like this idea that you have, they'll be willing to give more things up to benefit you, and they'll also ask for less in return. However, if you don't do a good job negotiating, the landlord might add unwanted things to the lease addendum. They might add in it that you'll have to have a certain type of insurance policy, that you're going to have a higher security deposit, or the worst, landlord will have access to the Airbnb account as a co-host, where they can see the guests, they can see the bookings, they can see the messaging going back and forth. Yeah, that's just a nightmare in and of itself. Another thing you don't want to happen, the landlord can make you responsible for repairs. You know, things you definitely do not want. Now, there's things that you should never allow a landlord to add in. For example, profit share, paying more than market rent. I would definitely never make sure those are in there. And I'm sure a few of you are thinking, well, what if that's what I need to lock in my first deal? Like, what if that's all it needs for me to get my first one? You should never do that, because the nature of this type of business model, like getting a landlord to rent their property and you put it on the market, you're taking the spread out of the market. You're not going to make more money because you paid more rent. You're still going to collect the same amount of cash, so paying more rent automatically makes the deal worse for you. To make this worse, you now have a landlord that is asking you to pay more, so not only are you getting a worse deal, but they are getting more of your cash every single month. Now, that landlord thinks that they can do this because they think that they're giving you, or they're doing you a favor by letting you use their property. So they think that they deserve a little bit of your top end. And to be honest, that's just not how we roll over here, nor is that how we pitch our business model. Now, with that being said, I have a strict sales system that I teach my students inside B&B Syndicate. And one of the things in that system is to make sure when we are making our approach, it is really to paint this as a benefit for the landlord. We are looking for landlords who are willing to see this as a benefit to them, because they need their back scratched as well, right? And if we can make this seem mutually beneficial, they're not going to have this landlordy, high horse kind of approach where they're all up in our business trying to raise rent all the time, or just straight up be an asshole. Do good business with good landlords and everybody will be happy. You do not want a landlord who thinks that he's getting one up on you, or I guess you could say hitting a lick. You do not want a landlord who thinks he can charge you more money. Trust me, you won't like that business relationship whatsoever, and hopefully it doesn't last very long either, because yeah. So here's some things that you could, or you would like to negotiate for. Some of these might be hard to digest for you, but you can definitely make these happen. For example, no security deposit, or a flat small security deposit like a couple $100 per door. Also, the ability to use the security deposit bond instead of an actual security deposit, which is like a non-refundable bond. You pay 10 to 15% of its value, and it's held for the landlord, still at a smaller rate, like maybe $1,000 max. So you're paying $150 for a security deposit bond. However, you'll never get that $150 back, because hopefully you'll never need it back, because you won't be moving out of the unit anyway, because you'll be profitable and you'll be cash flowing, so why would you leave? But I also believe it's in your best interest to not lock up money into a security deposit. It's just bad for your cash flow. So you want to negotiate with different types of security deposit agreements anyway. Additionally, although it isn't ideal, most places are going to make you pay like full month security deposit. With this, we can do what's called burn off, where after X amount of time, we slowly get that security deposit back. That's definitely a pro tip right there. I would definitely make sure to write that down. You probably won't hear that anywhere else. Remember, burn off. You also definitely want to negotiate free rent or rent concessions on rent or both. And yes, you can 100% do that. Sometimes we'll get 5 to 15% of or off market rate, and I'll also get about 4 to 12 weeks of rent for free. My last 6 deals that I did in San Antonio, Texas, we got 6 weeks free, and it was just honestly part of the negotiation. And if we sell the deal the right way, we can get the free rent. That of course is part of my B&B syndicate program, because there's just some things I'd like to keep close to home, because if I gave everybody on the planet my script for free rent, then it takes away my ability to get free rent. And I'm sorry, there's just some things I just won't give up for free. I hope you guys understand. I still like my free rent on my properties, and I'm sure my students do too, and I want to keep it that way. But for those of you that already have sales experience, it might start making sense, and you might actually create your own free rent script eventually down the line. Otherwise, for those of you without sales experience, like I said, B&B syndicate. Wink, wink. Another thing is, surprisingly, you want a longer lease compared to a shorter lease. You may think a shorter lease is less risky and give you better outs. However, a longer lease is actually good for you, for the reason being is because you're getting a possession of a property and you're going to buy the furniture, the decor, everything going inside of that property. And if you're only able to make money on that property for 1 year, your return on investment is weighed against your furniture costs. And of course, you can always up your lease and stuff like that, but I'm just breaking down numbers. But if you can spend the same amount of money for furniture then get 2 years or even 3 or 4 year lease, meaning 2, 3, 4 years use out of your furniture and revenue off that lease, it's much better for you and definitely much better for your risk and profit profile. The longer lease is actually good for you further, since because we're negotiating with the landlord, there's more things going on here than what we really want to be wary of. We want to take a look at the property and we want to get to know them a little bit, because you need to make sure you of course pick the right property, and not only that, but you pick the right landlord as well. Now, everyone would love to have an A-class property that has every single amenity that you can think of in the perfect location and the perfect city, and everything just checks all the boxes. Problem is, rents can be pretty high on those, so you'll have to do your market research and make sure that it looks like the market can support that, because the more rent you pay, like I said, the less room for spread typically. This is where you're going to have to find new ways to create value. Additionally, the housekeeping market is pretty high on cost right now, and so I would probably recommend doing a cheaper property initially when you're first getting started, where you can get slightly longer stays, like 3 to 6 months on average, to keep your housekeeping costs down until you can learn something like my system for hiring housekeepers on an hourly basis or an hourly rate. And yes, this is another thing we do. We pay about $15 an hour or so for our housekeepers right now. And I know a lot of people don't believe that, but that's exactly what we do. So imagine if you owned a housekeeping company that was charging you to clean your house. What do you think the housekeeping company paying them? Housekeepers at all the hotels and motels across the street from your property are probably paying them about $15 an hour or less for their housekeepers as well. Businesses pay hourly all the time, so why can't you, and why shouldn't I? You can do that if you did more properties that aren't so extravagant or grand. There might be more room for what you would call value creation. You take a property that doesn't seem so fantastic on paper, or necessarily it doesn't seem so ideal as a rent or as a rental, and you can do some truly amazing things to make the property more photogenic or appealing to the eye. Now, if it's well marketed on the Airbnb app, you can keep your calendar full at a good nightly rate, and you have more room for margin. Now, on the other side of the coin, you have properties that are extravagant and are going to be much, much more expensive. However, these properties need far less work on both the photogenic and appealing to the eye side of things and the marketing side of things, because honestly, those luxury properties speak for themselves, obviously. Another thing I must add is that a landlord may be more of an absentee landlord that doesn't do repairs and things like that. So when you go and tour the property, you want to see what state of repair the place is in. Do you trust things that the landlords tell you? Do you trust this landlord to repair things quickly when you report things to them? Or are you going to have to rely on your team or handyman yourself? You want to be careful with the properties that you choose, and you want to make sure to ask enough thorough questions to make sure that the state of the building is good. And as you have the conversation with the landlord, you can find out if the landlord's a good or generally a nice ethical person / landlord or not. If you now have a landlord that most likely has a large ego, like I said, is up on their high horse and ends up being kind of combative and dismissive, then you would typically find out your relationship with them isn't going to be largely positive. Now, one of the coolest things about rental arbitrage, especially right now and how the market is right now, housing prices might actually pull back this year. So with that being said, depending on what market you're in and depending on when you're watching this, buying a house may not really have an advantage because you may not gain appreciation for a little while on that property. Now, with that being said, if the market does end up coming down, you might find yourself a pretty sweet buying opportunity, and then there would be more advantages of buying, like depreciation for taxes and of course regular appreciation over time on that property. But with rental arbitrage, if you're looking for a heavy cash flow and not so worried about appreciation from the property that you own quite yet, it costs about 1/8 of the price to set up an Airbnb as an arbitrage as opposed to buying. Reason being is because when you buy an investment property, you have to put 20% down, deal with closing costs, all these other things, and then you put that all together and you have this huge deal with buying a property and then setting it up as an Airbnb as well. Now, on the other hand, if you find a landlord who's familiar with what you do and is willing to do business with you and willing to grow with you, you can avoid buying properties initially. So you don't have to wait months or years to save up for the next property. You can have the landlord buy the properties for you, and you can occupy them and cover the mortgages for them, and you benefit by obviously generating cash flow from those properties going into your business, into your pocket. It's really an ideal win-win. They get to invest and not worry about mortgages, getting paid, allowing them to scale faster, and you get to have steady cash flow of new deals, allowing you to scale faster simultaneously. Now, you can pick up 8 times as many units by doing this, being arbitrage versus buying, because remember, on the average, arbitrage is about 1/8 of the price compared to buying. Now, you consistently scaling with very little money out of pocket, you might find that you grow and you decide that you want to start buying properties. I will say on that note, if you're thinking about doing rental arbitrage on a recession could be a phenomenal time to do it. According to ChatGPT, it seems to think that starting a business in a recession could be a great idea because there could be a strong demand in certain sectors because there's less people getting into the business because of the recession. You might have an opportunity to get supplies or labor at a cheaper cost. This actually reminds me of a Warren Buffett quote where he once said that it's wise for investors to be fearful when others are greedy and to be greedy when others are fearful. Meaning, like I said, you should be investing in a recession when others are not. With that being said, you can get furniture for super cheap right now because there's people exiting the industry, and as suppliers leave the industry and guests stay in the industry, there will be less suppliers and more money for all the suppliers, and you as a host would be technically a supplier because you're supplying a place to stay for the guests in the industry. Now, I tend to agree with ChatGPT because if you're starting your business in a recession, you kind of learn to fight while it's tough and get good at this while it's tough. That way you don't have to learn to get good at this, and you've kind of got the best of it, and you know the ins and outs during the hardest part. Now, if a recession pops up out of nowhere in the middle of being a business owner, I think starting while it's hard is probably a better way to do it, because then you have this humble sense of, I guess, respect for the industry instead of thinking it was so easy like a lot of people did, and a lot of people I know did, and a lot of people who are quitting right now who were really good hosts when it was easy, when you can just get a property, throw some furniture in it, put it on Airbnb, and be booked out like crazy, and just be falling out of control. They're not good hosts when it's hard. Now, I suggest you hunt down some furniture from a staging company that's just using furniture for pictures, or some people who are looking to sell to get out. And make them a payment arrangement. You don't even need to pay full price for the furniture up front. You can just say, hey, I'll make payments over X amount of months. Then you find a landlord to sign that lease addendum. Now you have furniture and you're paying monthly payments on it, so you didn't have to come completely out of pocket. And you got a property and you can start your Airbnb arbitrage business as soon as possible. Keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer, guys. I'm just telling you what I use from the lawyers that I've paid thousands of dollars to get this stuff. So I hope that my expenses and experiences with arbitrage doesn't go to waste, and you can give this this opportunity to try, and hopefully make it for 6 or 7 figures this year. I really do hope that I've helped in some way for you to achieve that. And to be totally honest, it's pretty easy industry. I think anybody can do this. If you care enough to grow a business and stay disciplined day in and day out, you can do it. This is going to be fun, and I'm here to help. If you need anything, drop it down in the comments, send me a DM on IG, and I'm definitely willing to help you out. And as always, and of course, I have a free Facebook group. I just started with like-minded individuals, people that are in Airbnb and people that want to get into it. So if you want more of an educated opinion on your questions or thoughts, and you don't want to just have my answers alone, go into the free Facebook group, and the host of Airbnb Amplified can get answers for your questions. And you could also get insight on different markets, softwares, and automations and stuff like that. So with that being said, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe, as well as drop any questions or any thoughts you had down in the comments down below. Or maybe you would like to see, or maybe you would drop down below what you'd like to see from me next. And I'll see you guys in the next video. And if you made it to the end, thank you so much. Peace, guys. Go make shit happen.